Today on Locked On Canadiens, shall we go shopping on the RFA market?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. My name is Laura Saba, and I am not joined by my wonderful co-host Ian Boisvert, who is on vacation, but we'll be back a little bit later this week. And today what I want to talk about are a couple of RFA names that have come up. While they do seem unlikely, I did want to talk about them a little bit. That would be in our first segment. In our second segment, what I did over the weekend was watched the rebuild again. So I had watched it when it first came out back, I think it was in September of 2024. And then I just watched it again because I missed these goobers so much that I watched the reality show all over again. And I did want to talk a little bit about the difference a year makes based on my observations of that show. And finally, the Montreal Victoire have had their first playoff win, but also the longest professional women's hockey game in North America. So we'll get right into it. Earlier this week, or I would say late last week, we're a whole new week now. Sorry about that. I guess I don't know if it's a rumor anymore. It feels like, the person who covers the team, who's most plugged in to the Minnesota Wild, who is Russo, obviously, and super insider, and said something along the lines earlier this year, like there was a 70% chance that he would get traded. And then now he's saying that, did I even mention the player we're talking about? We're talking about Marco Rossi of the Minnesota Wild. It's Monday. Bear with me, everybody. So anyway, the apparently it's even more than a 70% chance. So obviously this is a conversation that we now have to have, an RFA that is available on the market. And I know the first thing you're going to say, and we're going to get like 90 comments about this, the first thing you're going to say is that this man is too small. And then another thing would be, why would the Minnesota Wild be so eager to part with him? And I think the question is not necessarily, I think the question about size is a valid one, but it shouldn't be the be all end all. I think you can get bigger in other sides of the lineup, and I think you can also learn to play larger, right? Just look at the difference with how Cole Caulfield played against the Washington Capitals, against how some of these other players that did not have experience played against the Washington Capitals in that first series, right? You don't necessarily have to be gigantic. But I get the concern. I get that people think that the second line center should be a large man. I totally understand. Even if his two line mates are large men. I'm going to give you that one. I just think that with the Minnesota Wild being so eager to get rid of him, I don't know that they're necessarily the best, I would say, not the best evaluators of his talent, but it feels like sometimes in an organization, once they sour on a player, it doesn't matter what the player does. It's just like his name is out there as being like not a fit on this team. And so they're just trying to get rid of him. And I think he does have a lot of value. And I don't necessarily think the Montreal Canadiens are going to go for him again because of that size. But I also I think that you do have to at least consider it. You do have to make the call, see how much he's worth, and consider it. So that was one name. And also that was a mailbag question from Scott. That I am now addressing on the Monday episode. And then, so there's another name that has come up. And again, I want you to listen before you react. And that's K'Andre Miller. And to be clear, if they were to get K'Andre Miller, he would be more of a replacement for Savard than filling a hole in the lineup, right? Filling a glaring hole that we already know exists in this lineup. Like that would be the purpose of K'Andre Miller. He had a not great season in New York. He also is injured and underwent surgery, I think, like last week or a couple of days ago. But he's expected to make a full recovery before the season starts. Hear me out. I know that he's not attained the lofty expectations for him, but I do think that he would be a good fit again if we're looking at him for bottom four defenseman um, and a replacement for David Savard. That's all I'm saying. So definitely something to look into. Probably somebody who right now his value is at the lowest it's ever going to be. So you could get a lot for him. All these guys, by the way, are RFAs that I'm talking about. But I think that rather than offer sheet, I do feel like the Canadiens would go, despite what Jeff Gordon said in the presser last week, I think the Canadiens would go more towards trading and a trade and sign or a sign and trade, whichever one. So a name that also keeps coming up. This is just a name that Canadiens fans keep bringing up. I want to be clear, is Mason McTavish. Now, you would be any team, you would be a fool not to try to go after Mason McTavish. But the thing is, Anaheim will not want to get rid of him, right? Like he's not available on the market, at least not right now. He's not somebody that the Anaheim's going to let go easily. So I just wanted to address it because it keeps coming up, especially in questions and comments. Like, and they could try and offer sheet him. That's fine. I don't know if it would work, and I really don't know if the Anaheim Ducks are going to be willing to let him go. Like, I simply don't see him as an available player. Somebody I do see as a more available player, not unavailable player, but a more available player is Gabriel Vilardi. And the reason I say that is because of the Jets cap issues more than anything else. I don't know that they're going to want to part with Nikolai Ehlers, for example. And I don't know that they would want to part with Gabriel Vilardi either, but it's just that it's going to be a little bit of a squeeze trying to get him. And I think that the Canadiens are probably positioned to go after him. He's 25 years old, so not super young, but right in that age group that we want, right? But he also, I think, will be somebody that a lot of teams will be going after. So I don't necessarily know, like, I don't think it's a pipe dream. Like Evan Bouchard is a pipe dream. It's not happening. The Oilers are going to give him a lot of money to stay there. That's what's going to happen. There's no question. And I know the Oilers are generally, like, they don't make smart decisions, and the Canadiens are very often the beneficiaries of that. I don't think that it's that same Oilers team anymore. So I'm not seeing that. I think it's a total pipe dream, absolute pipe dream, as much as I would want it, and as much as this podcast is on the record as wanting him for years and years and years. I just don't think it's going to happen. But Gabriel Vilardi is, if you look at the pending free agents for Winnipeg, and you look at how much they make, and you look at how much more they stand to make, he seems to be one where the Canadiens could take advantage of the situation. Again, not with an offer sheet, although that might be the best way to do it for any team. The Canadiens would have to be bold about it, though, and I don't know about giving up all those picks in the future. I would rather they trade with maybe existing prospects and picks, or even players, and just look at people who are decent enough but not part of this future and ship them off to Winnipeg. I think that out of all of these pipe dreams that we keep talking about, like Noah Dobson's on that list, but again, I don't think Noah Dobson is going to be I don't think the Islanders are going to be willing to part with him. That's the biggest thing. So on the RFA market, the ones I see being available are Miller, absolutely. Marco Rossi, we know that for sure, or 90% or whatever. And Gabe Vilardi, just out of necessity. I don't think they want to part with him. I think they will have to part with him because they won't be able to afford him and other players that they want to keep in this offseason. Anyway, so that was my whole long spiel about window shopping on the RFA market. I don't know what the Canadiens will do, but those are just some names I'm throwing out there that I think are going to be interesting to watch. And again, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say no on Rossi because of size and K'Andre Miller for lots of reasons. I just think a change of scenery would be good. I think that if you're on a team that has this is obviously about Villa, but if you're on a team that has been in disarray and you haven't really met your expectations, and then you look at Alexis Lafreniere and like how long it took him to meet the expectations, and just overall the New York Rangers vibes in general. I feel like a change of scenery, like that's the kind of player a change of scenery would suit. But again, I'm not for a glaring hole in the lineup. Like he's not going to be the solution to the Montreal Canadiens defense. I just think it's an option to look at for a couple of years. Is all I'm saying. And again, I'm not fully advocating. I'm just throwing it out there. That's what's on the market. That's what we're going to talk about. All right, in our next segment, we are going to talk about the difference a year makes. I rewatched the rebuild over the weekend, and how far the Canadiens have come over the course of the 1 year, and that's coming up in just a moment. Ever look at your bank account and wonder where did all your money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery, and now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is also smoother than ever, which I think is so important. So many relationships have so much conflict over money. And Monarch Money is going to make it so much smoother because you can track your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page as each other without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right. So a thing I did this weekend because I was missing the Montreal Canadiens so much, really, they're truly such a fun group, is rewatch The Rebuild. I had initially watched it earlier, and I'm so sorry for all our American viewers. We still haven't figured out a way that you guys can watch it. My co-host still has not watched it. And anyway, so I rewatched the whole thing, kind of tried to look at the way it was back then, look at the season that it covered back then, and just look at the season that we just lived, and kind of talk about like the difference that a year makes. I think the biggest thing that I saw was they were much more relaxed than I remember them being overall, right? Like in the on-camera interviews, when we saw the glimpses within the locker room and all of that. One thing that really stood out to me was just how many losses were covered in that show. Literally, how many losses, how many games ended in losses. What I thought was really interesting was they kept talking about the pursuit of the playoffs as if they thought it was a thing, right? They had clips from people on the radio talking about it. They had conversations about it. And in my mind, what I would have thought was they would have known that it's an absolute pipe dream, that that they had no shot of making the playoffs last year, which I thought, I don't know, there was something about it that I was like, oh, they seem so much more optimistic. And that was another thing that stood out for me. There was much less, maybe they covered less of it in the show, but there was much less doom and gloom than I thought there would have been, right? And again, so when I watched it initially, the first time around, I just really wanted all that behind the scenes stuff, right? Like I wanted to see how they interacted. I wanted to see, what goes on in the room. I wanted to see what their meetings were like, and all of that stuff. And I did think about one of the things that I thought about was how much Jonathan Kovacevic features in it, because he's such a personality, but also just how much I missed him this year on the blue line. And speaking of, by the way, New Jersey, Tom Fitzgerald says he wasn't happy with his group and changes are coming, and he's not coming back next year with the same group. So Kent Hughes, get right on that. and see what's out there, see what he's willing to part with. Maybe some in it. I don't know. That again, those are rumors from last year. Anyway, one of the most illuminating things was the goalie trade, right? So we got to see the behind the scenes of the Jake Allen trade. And I think it's interesting in that this year, a lot of us have kind of pointed the finger a little bit at the organization for letting that three goalie situation go on too long. And and the effect that it had, or the effect that we think it had, this is important, the effect that we think it had on Caden Primo's development. And what I realized was that, all along last year, that was something that was weighing on them too. It's just they were much less fussed about it than we were, I think. It was a known problem for them, but they were chill. They were nonchalant about it. And I thought that was really interesting. And you got to, hear from you got to be in the room with them when they were making those phone calls or receiving those phone calls. And then there were probably some trades that didn't go through, so there's a lot of stuff that we weren't privy to. But I also just I liked I like the insight into the dynamic we got of Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes, and just kind of, Kent Hughes is doing his thing and Jeff Gordon's just around, and Kent Hughes is bouncing it off of him and just kind of having that conversation, keeping him posted. And so it really is, it really hits home the comment that Jeff Gordon made last week about how he looks forward to how Kent Hughes is going to solve the problem this summer. It really is, he lets Kent Hughes manage. And I think that's really important. He lets Kent Hughes manage the team. One thing that I had forgotten, and I think it's really, really, really important, is that I had forgotten that Marty does not go in the room in between periods. Now, I don't know if that changed this year. We'll see. We'll see it in the next rebuild, which hopefully will come out at some point this offseason. I don't want to wait all the way until September. I hope it comes out earlier. And he said that he doesn't. He said it's up to them, right? And just how important that is. And the thought that I had when I saw that was, if it's still going on this year, just how much the players themselves had a role in their comebacks this season, how much the players themselves kind of went into the driver's seat. I remember I saw that Nick Suzuki was really disappointed last year when he didn't hit the 82 game mark. I think, he wanted to be a point per game player, and he was so in his exit interview, it was very calm, right, and the manager and Jeff Gordon were happy with him, but he wasn't happy with himself, which I thought was really, really interesting. And anyway, so all of this to say was there were a lot of things in there which I watched again with the lens of this year, which makes me even more excited for what's coming out this year. It just brought home to me that in their minds, it was always they were going to try to make the playoffs, even when they knew they sucked. And I thought that was really, really funny. A couple of other things from there. I thought the insight that we got into Brendan Gallagher's suspension, that was really interesting. And the way that he went about it. And I know this year's arc is probably going to be very different if we see any of Brendan Gallagher's personal life this year. Obviously, he went through a lot, very much so. Newlywed, had a baby, lost his mom, all that. There's a lot of probably emotional components to that. But I also thought it was interesting that he was one of the few players that really let us in, right? Raphael Harvey-Pinard and his spouse let us into their lives and their homes. A little bit Samuel Montembeault and his spouse, and obviously Brendan Gallagher and Emma Fortin. And but I was hoping to see a little bit more about the friendships between Christian Dvorak and Cole Caulfield. What do they do when they go out? Do they go to, they're always talking about hanging out together, right? They talk about how much video games they play together. Cade Gooley and Arbor Xhekaj, their friendships and things like that. So there was also the dad's trip that they had, which we got to see how the players kind of look like their dads and take after their dads. One thing that I would have wanted more of in hindsight after this season, after this past season and all the good vibes that went around, I wanted to see a little bit more of their lives at home. Interview more of the spouses, or have they spent some time with Brendan Gallagher and his partner at the time, fiance, now wife, just stuff like that. Have a little bit more of that, like, and the conversations that they had with the Raphael Harvey Pinard spouse, and just how she felt, on like observing and all of that. Like I would have liked a little bit more of that. There was a lot of mic'd up moments from the games, which I thought was really cool. But again, like I want more. I want to see more, and I'd like to see a little bit more. We saw enough of the coaching room after the games and stuff like that. I would like to see more video and stuff. And I know a lot of the stuff is they don't want other teams to know how you work and how you operate, so that they can't scout for you. But I thought about it, and it was the exercise of watching them again. It made me feel so much better about how much progress they made this year, because there are a lot of losses in that show. Like I said, it just really just made me feel so good about this past season. And, you know, my hope is that they build on it. The difference that one year makes, I hope that they take that much more progress. They make that much more progress over the next year. Anyways, that is my waxing poetic about these goobers that I miss. I love this team so, so much, but we do have to get to other pressing matters. There's other playoffs going on in the city, and we'll get into that in just one moment. All right, let's talk about the first of all, let's talk about the Rocket, and get that out of the way real quick. We don't really have news on the Rocket. Why? Because they have to wait 8 days between the time that they beat the Cleveland team, which is they're the Monsters, right? I keep wanting to call them the Cleveland Barons. I don't know why. The Cleveland Monsters, and the Rochester Americans. And the Rochester Americans, actually, because they swept their previous series, they got to wait 13 days before they start their series. And the Laval Rocket are just kind of hanging out for 8 days. So that series is supposed to start on Wednesday. So we will have more on that once it actually starts and happens. And anyways, but the Victoire series against the Ottawa Chargers in full swing. That is also a best of 5 series, and the first 2 games were in Laval. The Montreal Victoire also play in Laval. The first 2 games were in Laval. First night was I want to say Thursday night. The first game was Thursday night. The Victoire lost to Ottawa in that one, but they did win their Sunday matchup, and that game went into the 4th overtime. So they had almost 7 full periods of hockey, almost, and was the longest professional women's hockey game ever. Not the longest sorry. The previous PWHL game, longest game, was between Montreal and Boston last year, but there was a longer game than that in professional women's hockey, which was a CWHL game in 2018. And today they beat that. The Montreal team obviously came out. It was Kristen O'Neill scored, and then Laura Stacey scored. What else is new? Ottawa was able to come back and tie the game very, very late in the third to take the game into overtime, and then it went on, and continued to go on until 4th overtime, in which Kath Dubois scored the winning goal. I think the assist was Kristen O'Neill's as well. So all the names I just said are the names you expect to be scoring. But the game was actually quite exciting. They were quite exhausted by the end, but it was a really, really fun game, and it was on. I was not there. I watched it, and honestly, like, I was a little bit worried after they went down to Ottawa in the first game. I really, really don't want them to lose to Ottawa of all teams. I think, I just want more playoff hockey in Montreal, and that game really was, you got your money's worth. So if anyone went to the game on Mother's Day, they got their money's worth. Hopefully that was, that was the way that you wanted to spend your Mother's Day. All right. Two housekeeping things before we go. Obviously, we still have our contest, and that is a YouTube subscriber contest. So if you are new to this, or this is the first time you're hearing about it, Ian is giving away 2 signed photos of Montreal Canadiens players. Like, he likes to give away his Habs memorabilia. I don't have enough of it to give away, but he's just making it rain. So he's got a signed picture of Josh Anderson, and a signed picture of Arbor Xhekaj. And if you are subscribed to us on YouTube, you are eligible to win that. What's going to happen is that when we hit 4,500 subscribers, we're going to give away Josh Anderson. And once we hit 5,000 subscribers, we're going to give away Arbor Xhekaj. And all you have to do is, one, be subscribed to our show on YouTube, and two, write contest entry in the comments. If you have done this already, you do not need to do it again. You only need to do this once. We are putting all of you on a Google Sheet. If you have not done this yet, please ensure you are subscribed and that you write contest entry in a comment on the YouTube. Once you've done that, you're good to go. So that's the first item of housekeeping. The second item of housekeeping is that we are about to start our player reviews, and we want our good friends to come on and sort of talk about their guys. So we've got, for example, who would we have other than the wonderful K-Mom of Game Over for Caden Gooley, right? That makes sense. And so we're going to have our friends over. We've got some special treats. So if you are a friend of the show and you have a player you feel strongly about and you want to do that review with them, please let us know at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. We will feature you on. And also at the same time, send us your thoughts, right? Send us your thoughts. We are reviewing players by the vibes, by the numbers. No, first by the numbers, then by the vibes. And then for the players who are staying here, we're talking about their outlook for next season. For the players who are free agents, we are talking about who the Canadiens might replace them with, or would they consider re-signing them, and for what term and value. So that's going to be our big project for the next couple of weeks. Obviously, if there's any big news, we're going to talk about it. If there are any rumors, we're going to bring up the cowboy hat. Rumor Roundup will be back in full force. If anything big happens with the Rocket, we will be covering that. Whatever happens with the Victoire, we'll be covering that. But please make sure that if you are a friend of the show and you have a guy that you wanna do a review with, let us know at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. All right. And that's going to be it for me today. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. We're free and available every day, like you know. You can find us on social media. We are Locked On Canadians at Blue Sky. We are Locked On Canadians on TikTok. We are Locked On Canadians on Instagram. And we're Locked On Canadians at Gmail. Send us mailbag questions, segment ideas. It is your show. It is the summer. We can do whatever you want. And also, I'm sure you're going to send me a lot of messages about how Marco Rossi is small. Please do that. That's fine. All right. You'll find me on social media at The Access Pick. You'll find my co-host at Maybe It's Ian. He will be back this week. Don't worry. And I also am lining up a couple of guests for this week, for the days that he's not here. So that's coming too. Make sure you are subscribed. Like I said, I will see you all tomorrow.